Okay, today we've got the top boards. We've got our wood picked out. It's pretty similar. We're happy with the color. And that one's actually going to be flipped over without having the knots on the top. We're going for a cleaner appearance to our boards, kind of a uniform look. And we're going to be ripping everything down to width. We've already ripped this first one down to about 12 inches wide, which is kind of cool. And we're going to be doing the other ones. We have each of the ends lettered with how they go, and we know which side is supposed to be up. So we're ripping them on this table saw. We're being really careful using a feather board and making sure everything is nice and square. Tonight I'm hand jointing the edges of the walnut boards for the tabletop. Using my Veritas low angle plane. And on the end, this is my improvised bench, which is basically my table base. On the end I have an improvised doe's foot, I guess, that helps hold the board upright as I plane. Don't have anything to really clamp this to. It's braced against the wall with a piece of plywood. Tends to work pretty well. The bench is just about the right height at about table height of 30 inches. So planing down walnut, lots of fun. Once I have the board pretty much planed down on the top, smooth surface, then I can check the level of the surface and make sure I'm not having any high or low spots. And I do that by taking the level across it. I'll shine this light through from one side to the other. If I can see light coming through like here, I know I've got a low spot or a high spot somewhere else that I need to address. And that's probably right here on the end where it's high, a little bit low, and then it comes up here again. This was the last part of the board that I was working on and trying to get it down to level. I knew I had high spots here and on the other end, and apparently they're still there. So I'll continue working that until I have no light shining through that says no gaps whatsoever. If I can see the light again, even if this way it looks like it's tight, and it's sticking nicely to the board, not rocking, I do know that I have some work to do to clean that up. After I finish that part, I'll take my square. And so here's an example where the light does not come through from one side to the other. It's a solid square piece here. Don't have to worry about it. But when I come down to this end, there we go. You can see a little bit of light out here on the outside edge, and that's what I need to take care of, making sure that there's nothing there whatsoever in this good tight fit like this. So here I'm a little bit high on this inside edge towards me, and I'll have to take care of that little bit of reflective light. I'm planing off the top of the board. Typically you're going to want to go from the low end down here heading up into the higher end as you hand plane with the fibers going in like you're petting the dog hairs, laying it down on the back. But what happens occasionally is you're going to have a twist in the wood, and here I've got some rather rough fibers coming up because I'm going pretty much against the grain of what it wants to do. If I take this from this has been planed from this direction against these grains, it looks like they might be lying that way, but especially once we get down here, you're going to see that those fibers are turning around backwards. So I have a little bit of change of grain direction going on here. I need to plane it from the opposite direction anytime I have that kind of tear out happening. The rest of it, shiny smooth. Now let's take a look at this and see what happens when I approach this from the opposite end. Glassy smooth. You'll find you'll get different appearances at the tabletop by shuffling the boards around. We went for something with the best look for consistent grain and color, as well as balancing the widths of the boards across the tabletop. So over here on the table, I've got my boards all lined out. I have them marked with letters, so I know which sides go to which as I match them up. And what I'm doing is planing down the sides to join the boards. You can see a little bit of light coming through there. There's some light coming through, so I know that's a low spot. There we go. So it's just this end where it's tight, and I need to shave down this end just a little bit to get that tight. To align the top together, I prefer to use splines that run the full length of the boards. That way I know everything is going to be lined up for the entire length of the tabletop. The splines are 1/4 of an inch thick and fit into a groove 3/8 of an inch deep on each side of the board that's being joined together. This would be the perfect project for a hand grooving plane, but since I don't have that here, a slot cutter bit makes quick and dirty work. We're dry fitting our tabletop together. This is the back side, and we discovered that our splines were not routed to depth for one of them. This is why you do a dry fit. We also discovered that there are a couple that were difficult to put together, and that our splines, we could get them in, but they were a little bit snug on a couple of them, so took off a little bit more. And now we're going to route off the end a little bit better. So I'm in the middle of doing my glue up of the top, and I've chosen to do the center of the field first and then the wings on the outsides. The two outside pieces get glued together separately, then I'll glue the whole thing together. The reason for that is that, first of all, I've got more clamps that'll span across just a certain amount across the center. I've got these 3-foot or so clamps that won't work for the whole long width of the table. So I've glued up the field of the table, and I have one of the outside wings glued together. Did that last night. This morning I'm going to be gluing the other side piece together, and then we'll put everything together tonight. The outside boards or wings on the tabletop are 1 3/4 inches thick to give the appearance of being a thicker tabletop. The breadboard is also 1 3/4 inch thick. We did have to account for this in the joinery of the breadboard end, and you'll find more detail on that in an upcoming episode. And it's confession time. We did have a problem that we made when we were doing the grooves for the splines in the top. It felt really bad at first. The outside pieces I have had a little bit of sapwood both on the outside of the table, and what happened is when we were putting the grooves in, my son accidentally put the groove in the outside rather than the inside joining piece. So we decided that rather than just go with what we had and glue it together inside out, that the best solution is not to put that sapwood in between two pieces, but we decided we would cut off the spline on the groove for the spline on the outside of that piece, which cuts away some of the sapwood. We still have a piece that's a good 1.5 inches or so wide. It'll reduce the whole width of the table by that 3/4 of an inch, 3/8 times 2. We also took off the same amount of sapwood on the opposite side so that our boards are still balanced across the width of the table as far as the width of each board. So the outside ones are both 1.5 inches wide, then the next section in is the same. And I think that's going to be a much better solution than to say, I want a wide table. I'm going to sacrifice design for that extra 3/4 of an inch. Okay, this is our final glue up of the tabletop. Both sides are now on and in place. We're using a caul along either side as a clamp because we only have 2 clamps that are really long enough to go the whole width of the table. Essentially, we're just pulling in those 2 outside boards on either side, and on either end we have a caul set up to pull the top flat. Splines are also going to help hold everything in place, and I think we're pretty good to go. So even though this is on the back side and won't show, we're stabilizing any voids in the back with some 2-part epoxy. It's just regular, normal, clear 2-part epoxy. Mixing it up, sticking it in the holes, allowing it to soak in and bubble out of the voids. And we'll just sand that off later, even though it doesn't need to be. I kind of prefer if the back looks almost as good as the front.